Hello, welcome to the Comic Book Club. I'm your host, Jamil Payne, and with me is my co-host, Amanda Comey.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning, good morning. How you doing today, Amanda?
I'm doing all right. I'm ready to talk about uh boxers and saints, right?
That's right. We are a day late and a dollar short on this show. Audience, listeners, true believers. Well, I'm calling y'all this week. Like I said, we had technical dragons that we tried to slay, and the dragon won. So this will be going up a week later. So you'll be getting two episodes back to back weeks. Don't get used to it.
Um, do you want to just go ahead and get started?
Yeah, let's get started. We are talking Barca and Saints. Amanda, you are now the ordinary host for this show.
Yeah, which is fine. Boxers and Saints was my choice. It is a set of two graphic novels that tell a combined story, written and illustrated by Gene Luen Yang and colored by Lark Payen, published by First Second Books, which also published American Born Chinese, same writer artist. And both of those books won several awards. Boxers follows the story of Little Bao, a boy from Shandong, who becomes a leader of the Boxer Rebellion. Saints follows the story of Four Girl, a young girl from the same village who becomes Catholic, adopts the name Viviana, and has visions of Joan of Arc. And the two volumes have a bit of interaction and are intended to sort of show the nuance in the conflict that good and bad isn't really not really the best words to describe what happened. So one of the one of the reasons why I really loved this story was that it reminds me so much of martial arts movies that are set in sort of the turn of the last century.
Okay.
And I had wanted to start by asking you just are you a fan of the Wong Fei Hong genre of martial arts movie about the benevolent doctor who raises a militia and throws the foreigners out of his city?
Yeah, I am. I am, of course. Yeah.
Okay. I'm just I actually I have a lot of those movies. This is I think in particular the Once Upon a Time in China series where Jet Li plays Wong Fei Hong, I think are just they're just a lot of fun to watch, and they have some really amazing fights. Donnie Yen is the bad guy. There's this epic fight on ladders. They get out the lion dragon costumes. They have boats. They have I don't know. It's almost like Lord of the Ringy,
Well,
but
I just about to say the cinematography in those movies are always really good.
yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, you can tell that the people making those movies also have a fondness for this sort of, you know, propaganda heavy folk tale of the Chinese heroes saving his country.
Is it propaganda though? Do we call the stories about our heroes propaganda?
I mean, we weren't communist for the last century. Um, I mean, I think some of the stories about our heroes have turned into propaganda. I mean, and it's like a really good question. I
I mean,
think,
I think the question I just asked actually raises the heart of this story, right? Because
mhm.
everything is from a certain point of view. To quote a famous, old hermit that live in the desert, like everything's you can see everything from any point of view if you wanted to. And I think this story like encapsulate that, right?
Yeah. So enough about me trying to sell you on uh my favorite Jet Li movie. We can talk about the book specifically. I just wanted to throw it out there that that these books come from like kind of a well-known genre, and that like one of the things that the writer does very well in general is sort of pull in a lot of Chinese folk tales and traditions in a really organic way, um, that just sort of it makes it feel real. I don't know how else to. It's like world building almost.
Right, right, right.
Um, so I've been I've been talking a lot. I was obviously really excited about this. What was your overall feel?
I just want to thank you for suggesting this because I really had a, I really enjoyed myself like reading this book and like the complications that it brings up. And like, this may sound like I'm a caveman, but I feel like if this was a regular book,
Hmm.
I think I would fall asleep.
Oh
But
yeah, for sure.
but in comic book form, like, it's one of those things where like this book brings up so many questions, so many complicated questions with no easy answers, but it's all digestible in a way that you can understand.
Yes. I'm a
And,
very big fan of the belief that we only have so much brain power. And if you waste too much of your brain power trying to read the words and imagine the pictures, you have less brain power free to think about the ideas. So,
right.
like having the story told simply with simple images lets your brain have the extra energy to think about what's going on. Um, I think it was an excellent choice for a comic book story.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, like just like the art, right? There's a lot of bad things that happen in this book, and I don't know if it would be as digestible if the art was it was realistic, as opposed to like it's almost painting like a children's book in a
Yeah.
lot of ways. And I think that makes the things that happen, like burning the church full of children, you know, just all the murder. I think the art helps get you through those horrific moments without necessarily feeling like they're downplaying it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Do we want to? I mean, I feel like we've both expressed some really good, like, wow, this book was good at this book was good at that. Do you want to talk about some of the story elements,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
specifically,
yeah.
like go through and talk about what parts of the story really worked?
I think we should start with Little Bow. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess you could go either way, but I feel like since it's technically volume one, and I think his story informs Four Girls' story a
Hmm.
bit, so I think it's easier to start with him.
I think
It's
you're
just
meant to read it that way also.
okay, yeah. It's just like, well, yeah, that is true because a lot of things that happens in the Four Girl book is a reaction to what Lil Bow does in his book.
Yeah.
But it just, man, it just ended up being a real tragic tale, right?
Hmm.
It's like because like he's what 14, 15 at the most, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, he is surprisingly young. Too young.
And yeah, too way too young. And like I think it's starting when he's a kid is like that makes it more powerful because you follow him into like as like a child just playing into like young adulthood. You know what I'm saying? Just barely out of a preteen.
Yeah.
And there's something powerful about this. There's a lot going on here. There's a lot of disenfranchisement. How he looked up to his father. Then his father got beaten badly, and how his father was never the same man again.
Mm.
It's just, Look, I'm not gonna lie to you.
Yeah.
I was rooting for him, even when he did horrific shit. I was still kind of rooting for this side, and like I wonder if that has anything to do with what I know of history, and that informs me in how I feel about what he is doing. Right?
We obviously have sort of the historical perspective to know that anytime white people show up in your country, it's going to be a bad time.
Talking about Jesus.
So, we perhaps, with that historical perspective, can like root for him even more because, maybe we wish that things had turned out differently. But it's also
It,
like a testament to how well it's written,
right?
that you can
Exactly.
relate to, he ends up committing horrific acts and hurting, killing thousands of people, but we understand why. And I mean, it's just so, at so many moments in this story, I was stopping and thinking, like, what would I have done? Would I have done this? And a lot of the time I was saying maybe.
Well,
And
you
a
know,
couple of
it's
times I was like, yes, yes, I would have done that.
well, you know, the ugly truth is no nation is built on goodness. Like
Right.
every nation is built on war crimes, on horrific acts
Yeah.
perpetrated by a side. Like you don't get a powerful nation unless you do that. It's just something like, especially people like us who are generally happy and free thinking and probably maybe not as grown up as we should be. We don't like to think about that shit.
Yeah.
But like that's absolutely the truth. You know what I'm saying? Hell, we all live in America. We know how we got this place. We
Hmm.
don't talk about it much, but we know how this motherfucker got here.
Yeah.
so so yeah, it's terrible, but like there's like you could almost understand that. You just like, well, he can't play nice with him. Like, what else is he going to do? It's hard, right? Because like he burns a church full of women and children,
Yeah.
and like that's the one I just like, Jesus, dude. Well, but you know what though? This actually does bring me up to another point though. His what devil on his shoulder? What should we call him?
The first emperor of China.
The first emperor of China. Yeah, or we can call him that. Yes, that will work too.
Yeah, his conscience is personified through a bit of magical realism, which was again a really interesting element of what's otherwise just straight historical fiction.
So let me ask you about that.
Yeah.
Do you think the magic is real?
Um, so I believe that in this story, the magic is real. So I
Uh,
believe that like everyone sees the spirits of the gods. I don't believe that we're meant to read this as it's only as only Little Bao's imagination.
Not even imagination, but like some type of metaphor, maybe. Like
I mean, it
because
it also works on that level, but like I think that's sort of like I think that's supposed to sort of remind us that this isn't exactly a story that happened in our world.
I think what's interesting about the first emperor of China is that he's always right. As terrible as he may be, as terrible as his ideas is, as his advice is, he's never wrong. And I find that really interesting because that's never really how that usually plays out.
Yeah, we're in the Christian tradition, we're accustomed to gods that have knowledge of things are benevolent or good,
Right,
and it seems really interesting to have like the devil be the one who's right, essentially. Or to think about the fact that you could have gods that are powerful and knowledgeable but amoral.
right.
Um, it's a very, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, well, yeah, like obviously that's a thing you should be able to believe in, but um, it's sort of a blind spot coming from my background, anyways.
And coming from our background too, because again, when he tell him to do something terrible, he's right. And when Lil Bow doesn't do it, he'll tell him, well, this will come back and bite you in the ass. And it always does.
Yeah.
And like, it's just a weird dynamic. And like, when Lil Bow chooses not to listen to him, he's following his like moral compass. But then that moral compass seems to me anyway, always seems to bite him in the ass when he decides to be, you know,
Mm.
moral, when he decides to be like forgiving or like not as hard on people.
Well, and it's really interesting because I think that like there are multiple biblical stories where like God tests his followers by coming down and saying, "Hey, like I want you to do this thing." And they're like, "Wait, really? Like that's bad." And they have to sit there and reason through whether they should or should not do it just because God told them to.
Right.
I mean, there's older stories, non-biblical stories about that conflict too, but like I think it's just really interesting that it's sort of taking like this traditional like folk tale, this traditional like morality play, and it's kind of the opposite of what we almost always see, where it's like you know what? Maybe morality isn't really the thing you got to worry about. Maybe you got to worry about just being right.
Well, and again, it's hard for us. Again, not just because we live in a country where we relatively safe. Again, especially me and you, where we maybe not quite grown up, still watching Dragon Ball Z. And like, let's face it, like whether you're a Christian or not, we both grew up Judeo-Christian society
Yeah,
where where morality means everything. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
So we're coming from this as shit. We coming in as like the foreign white people in a weird way. Where we read him do these terrible things, and you rooting for him to like, no, you should follow your conscience and do the right thing. But every time he does, every time he quote unquote listens to us, it bites him in the ass. And in the end, it gets him killed
yeah,
because he hesitates because he's not a complete terrible person.
yeah. That Christian morality is that yin that they were complaining about. That feminine weakness that corrupts everything.
Drinking buckets of menstrual blood. Yeah, yeah.
Why not?
You know what? I have a weak stomach. I ain't gonna lie. I just kind of glossed over those words like really quickly. Like, nope, don't. Just need to read that once. Never need to read that again. Like, I
See,
don't need that.
it's
Huh?
funny because I almost wondered if that was a hilarious misunderstanding of
Oh, probably.
communion.
Yeah. I just yeah. Flush blood of my blood. Yeah. It absolutely like that. Well, you know what? Let's touch on it. The fact that like it, this book really takes sexism the task
Mm,
by showing how terrible it is. Like, there's no two ways about it. Just how bad. I'm not one to talk about damn with the patriarchy. I'm not that guy. You know this, but like, man, they really hated women back then. I don't know how to say it. Like,
yeah, they just yeah, no, you're right. They just didn't really think of women as people. They were like, some sort of like level in between human and animal.
yeah, like it's real, and the fact that they felt like they get their evil from women, like that's just a weird thing. Who would ever, like that? Just crazy to me. It just reeks of like male inadequacy,
Hmm.
and like it's one of those things that constantly comes up. Right? It's just not like a one story beat thing. Like it constantly comes up in both stories, and it comes up even more in Four Girls since she's actually a female.
Yeah. Um,
So what did you think about that being a woman?
um, so, it's interesting because, like, I almost didn't notice it.
Really?
Um, well, because I think because it's not surprising to me.
Right,
Like
right, okay.
I want to say maybe like 5 to 10% of men actually still think like that. And I'm also, familiar with like I don't know, I guess I just wasn't really surprised. And what I was reading in it was, there was this idea that like your passion for women could make you think poorly, and it was like, okay, that might be a legit idea. And
Oh, oh, oh,
that was
oh, oh,
offered.
that's definitely legit, but that's different from what they were doing.
Well,
That's
right, and that was the version that was offered by the doctor at the beginning.
right,
Um, and then little Bao, I believe her name was Mei Wen. But
right.
he meets his girlfriend, and she's a good fighter and she's a good leader, and she actually raises a militia of women to help, and she's literate, and she can read and write, and she helps people. She heals the injured, and actually has kind of a code of like what she and her followers will and will not do. And I feel like it was similar to the role of the similar but different to the role of that first Emperor of China character, where it was like, hey, like you're standing around complaining about like how bad the women are, but actually they're not. And they're helping even though you hate them. And like maybe you should listen to them.
And like it now, this may sound sexist. I know in some circles this may sound sexist, but I think what she brings is something I think men don't have a whole buckets of as much as women do is compassion.
Mm-hmm.
Like you know what I'm saying? Like she treated white devils and her own people alike. When they was injured.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something Bow wouldn't do, and I think that is an inherently not necessarily not completely, of course, but I think that's a inherently feminine, female, however you want to call it, trait of just being compassionate towards people. You know what I'm saying? And like maybe Bao should have took something from that. You know what I'm saying? A little bit of that lesson from her.
Yeah, but that's exactly like that compassion is what made him unable to follow all of the emperor's
Yeah, you're
commands,
right.
right? So it's really
See, there
well,
we go again.
but
You see?
see, that's what's so interesting is that like on the one level, on the one level, it's just like blatant sexism, like, oh yeah, like whatever, women are horrible, they're weak, they're infecting you and corroding you. But on the other level, it's like there is actually an interesting statement about like, can you be powerful and compassionate? Um, and I mean, I feel like maybe this is a good opportunity to switch to talking about Viviana a little bit,
Right, right.
because power and compassion is like kind of what Christianity was trying to bring.
See, okay, so Vivian's story.
Yeah.
I like her,
Hmm.
but she strikes that line of being of almost being unlikable. She doesn't quite cross that, but like she's really forceful. Like she's almost stupid and she's almost too brash in the way she acts sometimes, right? and like girl, you're gonna get yourself killed. Like, but you understand why she's like that though, because of her upbringing, where they just treated her like shit. Like she didn't even have a real name. Her name was what, fucking Four Girl.
Yeah.
And it's just like, you know, it. She won me over. Like I was worried. Then she apologized to dude who was trying to teach her how to sword fight, right?
Hmm.
And he was like, "You get the wooden sword. Well, I want the nice sword. Like, well, you ain't earned this nice sword yet. I don't care. I want the nice sword." I'm just like, maybe you should listen to the guy trying to teach you. Not because he's a guy, but he know what he's doing. Like, but like this is not even my problem with her story. I think what's the author's name?
Yang.
Yang. Okay, he clearly, in my opinion, he clearly falls on the little bow side of things as opposed to the Viviana side of things. Just for the simple fact, Viviana, in my opinion, was never genuine in her beliefs ever.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? It's just like everything for her was out of convenience or a way to get out. But at no point did it ever really seem like she was like a real follower of Christianity. The way how Lil about it was like a real follower of what I don't know if you would call a religion per se. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It just seemed like she believed because it was helpful to her. Am I reading that wrong? Because like this is just how it's.
Well, no, no, no. I agree with you, and I think that makes it even more tragic that they were killing people over things that they didn't even really believe in.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
they're walking up to people and they're like, "Hey, are you Christian?" And they're like, "Well, yeah, the guy at the church feeds me. It's great." And then they killed him. And it's
Huh.
like it's not even like a deeply held conviction. And I even believe that
Wow.
like
Wow.
Vibiana's version of Christianity was even just like a a slightly different version of what Little Bao believed. Like she um like I believe that Jesus was just like her version of the goddess of compassion with many hands and many eyes. So like I feel like that made it even more tragic, like understanding that there was a famine in this country and that the Christian missions were coming in and just like sort of giving people places to sleep. And then suddenly the people who accept that help are branded as traitors.
Wow. You know what? I've never thought about that. Like, that made what Lil about doing even more terrible. Like, wow.
You're welcome and sorry.
Well, no. It just cause like when you read the little bow side, and then there's a second side coming. So what you're assuming is you'll have cause little bow is almost a zealot, right? He's
Yeah.
all you almost consider him a zealot. So what you thinking is you'll get not only the woman's perspective, but another zealot for the quote unquote Christian side. But she's not really a zealot. Not
Yeah.
not even in the least little bit. You know what I'm saying? She's almost a bad Christian, right? She constantly interrupts. She got all these fucking questions. You know what I'm saying? She's rude as shit.
Yeah, she has visions of Joan of Arc and she's still like super casual about it, right? Like
Yeah,
like she has visions of Joan of Arc and because she lives in this version of China where you can see old gods, she's like, okay, fine, like you're just a weird, like you're just like a white god. I don't think this is weird. This is fine. Um I really loved her sort of nonchalance about it. Like her,
she even refers to them as devils. Like she
hmm
referred to like teach me to be a devil. So like even like even her version of Christianity is like, yeah, this shit maybe this shit is evil. I don't give a fuck. This is what I want to be. Like it's weird, man. It's just kind of like
this particular notion of like people being of people being killed for something that other people believe in more strongly is a thought that I have a lot about. This is a slight digression. I'll bring us back
Okay.
quickly, but just whenever I think about like anti-Semitism and the Holocaust, because my family is technically Jewish, but I do like absolutely nothing that would signal or prove or I don't know, like I don't do anything Jewish except occasionally like watch Monty Python and like make jokes about gefilte fish being disgusting. Like I'm not. I know some people who are Jewish, whatever, but the idea that like someone could think that there's something wrong with me for like something that my grandfather was into is like so weird and confusing to me. Um,
Right. Right.
and so like that's what's so scary is that's oh, like somebody could want my mom to be killed because her maiden name was Friedman. Like, that's stupid. Like, my mom went to a synagogue like 5 times in her life or something, you know? She's not Jewish, and somebody else could project their own perceptions about like what it is to believe in that onto people who don't even believe it. So I was just thinking like I've seen that before. Like um I've seen people with an irrational hatred artificially inflate the group of people that applies to out of
Yeah.
fear.
Yeah, I wouldn't know nothing about that.
Um, I
I'm, I'm joking, Amanda.
I was gonna say, I feel like we're gonna talk about that in our next book too.
We are. We are. No, I wasn't diminishing you. I was just joking. Like, yeah.
No, no, you're right.
But no, yeah. Then the way her story ends,
Hmm.
just like right. So so I'm gonna tell you, it was beautiful,
Yeah.
and the ending was beautiful, right? The the fact that she gave a little about the prayer said maybe you're able to use this one day.
Yeah, so
Yeah. Okay.
let's just
Okay.
go over like what happens. So Little Bao attacks the city where she's staying at the church,
Right.
and his brother actually catches her and is planning to rape her.
Right. Because he's a creepy bastard.
Right. And he's slightly, somewhat hesitating, and Little Bao has an opportunity to stop him.
Well, should we talk about the fact that Lil Bow seen her as a child when she was making the monsters face,
Yeah.
and like that was like his first crush.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, no, that's true. They crossed paths once as children, and he actually was really fond of her dramatic monster face that she made um, to try and scare all of the adults.
And it
Um,
worked.
yeah. Um, but so he has an opportunity to stop his brother, and she flippantly says something like, "Oh, like I guess you expect me to thank you or be grateful or something." And he's like, "No, I'm still gonna kill you." Um, and in the Boxer volume, the scene sort of ends there, and then she's dead. Um,
Then Lil Bow dies, or so we think,
right, and then
at
and
the
then
end of
there
his.
yeah, and then there are further stories, and we see that Little Bao, we believe, is killed at the after an unsuccessful battle in Beijing. So then we get the Vibiana side, and this is what you were starting to talk about, right?
Right. As in he's like, all you have to do is renounce, your Christian belief, and I'll spare you. And she doesn't do it for no real good reason besides just to be like, fuck you.
Hmm.
Like,
Right, because as you were
which,
saying, we know she doesn't like.
yeah, like Just as a bigger fuck you, like fuck you, you fucked up the city, you don't killed all these innocent people. Like I'm not. No. She had like a practical reason, right? Wasn't it like, well, someone says like, well, if I denounce that and you lose, what the fuck then? Like now I'm stuck on the wrong side. So, but no, and he gives her what seems like a half hour to live. It seems like they're in that back alley for a minute, and he teaches her a prayer. I mean, she teaches him a prayer, and she was just like, maybe you're able to use this. I want to give you something.
Yeah.
And then she died, and then he kills her in cold blood.
Yeah.
And that's where her story ends. Then we get the epilogue. We'll come to find out Lil Bow is a hard man to kill, and they were about to burn his body because they was dumping all the bodies in the
They were rounding up all of the boxers to kill
yeah,
after they had lost.
right,
And he wakes up in a pile of dead bodies, which I thought, I was like, maybe this is hell. For a
right.
second, I was like, is this epilogue in hell? Um, but he gets up and he tries to run away, and some guards catch him, and he's able to remember enough of that prayer that she taught him to fake being Christian so that he can get away.
And then his brother comes saves him,
Hmm.
which is like that's complicated because his brother's a rape might kind of be a rapist, but also he's loving. So I don't fucking just all types of complicated. So I'm about to say something kind of offensive. So
I'm ready.
okay, you know how we had the episode where we talk about how like racism or discrimination can work out in your favor sometimes.
Yeah.
It worked out in his favor because I guarantee you, to the white people, they all looked alike.
Yep.
They, I don't, I don't mean to laugh, but I know exactly what happened. I was just like, didn't they notice him fighting? Like, oh, of course they wouldn't notice him fighting because they all look alike to them.
Yeah, I mean, in addition, it was also a large battle. It was disorganized. The same people who were cleaning up and chasing down the stragglers weren't necessarily at the front lines to see who was leading the charge and organizing things. But you're right.
Yeah, maybe.
Also, they would not have been able to tell apart, you know, hundreds of similarly dressed Chinese peasants.
I just like, you see, sometimes racism works out.
Yeah,
Sometimes racism can save your life, and that's one of those times.
yeah. Um,
Okay,
so,
go ahead, go ahead.
well, I wanted to ask one more thing. How do you think Little Bao felt like after that? Like, what type of a person do you think he was after he had to pretend to be Christian to save his own life?
Well, number one, if everybody ain't afraid to die till it's almost time to die, right?
Mm,
You brave till you got a gun in your mouth. I think he'd probably be a little more of a compassionate person because he sure was crying. He sure wanted to live, and he has nothing to live for. But fucking like survival instincts kicked in, right?
mm,
And I think I don't know. I don't know what type of person he'll be. I mean, like you can go two ways, right? This either taught him a lesson of compassion, and he'll go live his life as like a merchant somewhere or something like that, or it could just make him even a worse person. Learn how to deceive people. Because if it's one thing, Lil Bow is a liar. Like
mm.
that might be the first time he lies in the whole fucking book. He's actually quite honorable, even when he's doing terrible shit. So I don't know, man. That's a good question, Amanda. I may have to have some time to think about that one.
It's I also am not really sure what I think, but I it's one of the most interesting thoughts that I took away from the book was what kind of person does he grow up to be after this? Because he has some really amazing, admirable qualities, but he's also capable of being a horrible person. Um,
And
and
he's
for
still
him
young,
to,
so he
yeah,
has his whole
exactly.
life ahead of him.
Yeah,
And hell, he killed both his girlfriends. So
yeah. I do want to point out that the illustrations were really good, and even though everyone was like the color palette was muted and everyone was drawn wearing almost exactly the same thing, um, from facial expressions and posture and stuff, you really could tell all of the characters apart, which is something that sometimes you can't even do in like
comic book,
superhero in superhero comics. It's like,
yeah.
Emma Frost turns to the right in profile and suddenly you can't recognize her anymore.
Oh, it's one thing I want to bring up. The only thing that was hard for me, besides the mentions of menstrual blood, that was kind of hard for me. The only thing that really kind of upset me was when poor girl got beat by her cousin.
Mm,
Like that really bothered me. And just how coldly her uncle ordered it. He like, don't stop until I tell you to. And it's just,
yeah.
it's horrific shit. I run away from home too. Fuck them. Sometimes it's just hard being a woman.
Mm.
Shit, man. Yeah. All right, Amanda. I think that's it for this one.
We want to end on a high note like that?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Would you recommend this book?
Oh, absolutely. I have already loaned this book out um to a couple of people.
Right, right. Now, if people, we haven't done this in a while. Now, if people want to get in touch with us, where can they do that at, Amanda?
We are on Twitter as Comic Book Club 52.
Uh huh.
And they can also email us, comicbookclub52 at gmail.com. And we're also on Facebook as the Comic Book Club, probably the least popular one, but we're working on it.
Every once in a while, every once in a while, we'll get somebody that's looking for the real comic book club, and they come across our page.
That's what it's all about, man.
Yeah. Oh man. So, I guess I suggest next week's reading, huh? Where, yeah. It's my turn. So for next week, Amanda, we had this conversation about where I was gonna start to pick more fun stuff.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
yeah, cause that's kind of like I feel like we need some balance because we've been reading a lot of heavy stuff lately. So like I'll pick like the fun pulpy comic book hero suit stuff because I know you haven't read a lot of that, and I'd like to get your opinion on some of these stories. You know what I'm saying? Just
Yeah.
you know, so but it is Black History Month, and usually I'm not the one for stuff like this, but I felt like it would be irresponsible, and what inspired me to do this was actually comicsology. I was on comicsology one day, and like for Black History Month, they actually suggested this book, and it's called Incognito. It's about a black man in the 20s, I believe, because I haven't read it yet, who can pass for white, and he goes undercover in the South.
I feel like this is going to be a really good compliment to what we were just talking about today.
Yeah, and I feel like this is the perfect thing to cap off February for Black History Month. If we read this, it looks good. It doesn't look like there's a lot of comments. There's a lot of like African American made comments, especially in the last few years, that I feel like are kind of hokey.
Mm,
Like I know you mentioned like the John Lewis comic, right? And I feel like that's kind of hokey. Not that John Lewis is hokey. That's not what I'm saying. But like it's just there to get a certain type of audience.
mm,
I I feel like this is a comic book first. It's reality. You know what I'm saying? But like, I feel like this is a good story first, as opposed to like some propaganda is not the right word, but you know what I'm saying. Just some like hokey, inspirational type stuff, like that one issue of Spider-Man where he meets Obama.
Mm, okay. Okay. So you're not expecting this to be a very special issue of a comic book. It's going to be
Yeah,
a good story that happens to be appropriate for Black History Month.
exactly. And
Okay.
and it's one I actually kind of like. This type of story is one I've always been fascinated by.
Hmm.
Of black people passing for white, that I think isn't touched on a lot. You know what? We
We'll
will
save
talk
it.
about.
We'll save it.
Yes. We will save this for next week. All right, Amanda. Let's get out of here. I am Jamil Payne,
I'm Amanda Comey.
and we are out.